In today's video, I'm going to teach you how you can connect an SQL Server Management Studio client to your Azure SQL database, step by step. This process is essential whether you're managing databases or simply learning how to interact with Azure SQL. Now let's walk through it, step by step, from making sure we meet all the prerequisites to the actual connection process. Before you even attempt the connection, it's crucial to ensure you have a few things in place. First, make sure that you already have an Azure SQL Server and database created in the Azure portal. Without these, you won't be able to proceed. Next, you'll need to have downloaded and installed a compatible version of SQL Server Management Studio, at least version 18.x or later. This newer version supports modern authentication, including Azure Active Directory and multi-factor authentication, which is necessary for connecting to Azure SQL. Another vital point is to confirm that your client machine's public IP address is allowed in the Azure SQL Server firewall rules. This is important because Azure SQL needs to know it can communicate with your device. Alternatively, ensure there's a network path you can use if you're working with a private endpoint. Lastly, make sure you have valid credentials. This could be a SQL authentication login, which involves a username and password, or an Azure AD identity that can access the database. Now let's jump into the detailed steps of how to make this connection. Start by opening SQL Server Management Studio. In the Object Explorer, you'll see an option to connect. Click on it, and from the drop-down, select Database Engine. This action will open the Connect to Server dialog. In this dialog, you need to fill out some critical information. For the server type, select Database Engine. Then, for the server name, enter the fully qualified server name of your Azure SQL Server, which should look something like myserver.database, windows.net. Next, choose the appropriate authentication method. If you're using SQL Server authentication, you'll need to enter the username and password that were created in Azure SQL. If you're set up for Azure AD authentication, you'll proceed with those credentials instead. In the Login section, type your username, either for SQL authentication or Azure Active Directory. Then, enter the corresponding password. Before you click Connect, you might want to explore the Options section. Here, you can select the default database, manage encryption settings, and decide whether to trust the server certificate. Typically, encryption is mandatory for Azure SQL connections to ensure security. Now, go ahead and click Connect. If your client IP hasn't been added to the Azure SQL firewall yet, you might get prompted to allow access by adding a firewall rule. Alternatively, you could receive an error. If everything's set up correctly and there are no barriers, you'll successfully see your server and database objects in the SQL Server Management Studio's Object Explorer. And that's all there is to it. By following these steps, you can seamlessly connect to the Azure SQL database, making your database management tasks that much easier.